Chapter 17. Breathing and Exchange of Gases. As you have read earlier, oxygen is utilized by the organism to indirectly break down simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, etc. to derive energy to perform various activities. Carbon dioxide, which is harmful, is also released during the above catabolic reaction. It is therefore evident that oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cells and CO2 produced by the cells have to be released out. This process of exchange of O2 from the atmosphere with CO2 produced by the cells is called breathing, commonly known as respiration. Place your hand on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to breathing. How do we breathe? The respiratory organ and the mechanism of breathing are described in the following section of this chapter. 17.1 Respiratory organs. Mechanisms of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitats and level of organization. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelentrates, flatworms, etc. exchange O2 with CO2 by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Earthworms use their moist cuticle, and insects have a network of tubes, tracheal tubes, to transport atmospheric air within the body. Special vascularized structure called gills, branchial respiration, are used by most of the aquatic arthropods and mollusks, whereas vascularized bags called lungs, pulmonary respiration, are used by the terrestrial form for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals respire through lungs. Amphibians like frogs can respire through their moist skin. Cutaneous respiration also. 17.1.1 Human respiratory system. We have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. It leads to a nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, a portion of which is the common passage for food and air. The pharynx opens through the larynx region into the trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production and hence called the sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra into a left and right primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergoes repeated division to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, ending up in very thin terminal bronchioles. The trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and the initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structure called alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli comprise the lungs. Figure 17.1. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lung surface. The part starting with the external nostril up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part, whereas the alveoli and their ducts forms the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. The conducting part transport the atmospheric air to the alveoli, clear it from foreign particles, humidify and also bring the air to the body temperature. Exchange part is the site of actual diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column, ventrally by the sternum, laterally by the ribs, and on the lower side by the dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of lungs in thorax is such that any change in the volume of the thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lungs pulmonary cavity. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we can't directly alter the pulmonary volume. Respiration involves the following steps. First, breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and CO2 rich alveolar air is released out. Second, diffusion of gases O2 and CO2 across alveolar membrane. Third, transport of gases by the blood. Fourth, diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and tissues. Fifth, utilization of O2 by the cells for catabolic reactions and resultant release of CO2, cellular respiration, as dealt in the chapter 14.